I walked into the living room and stopped dead. My husband Michael was doubled over on the couch, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "What?" I asked, still holding the grocery bags. He pointed at me without saying anything, just pointed and laughed harder. That laugh, it was the kind that made everyone else in the room want to know what was so funny. Except I was the joke. I was standing there in my old denim overalls, caked in actual mud from the backyard garden project, my hair piled on top of my head in a nest that hadn't seen a brush in 3 days, and my face still had dirt smudged across my cheek from where I'd wiped sweat away. I looked like something that belonged in a swamp, not in my own home. Michael had said something that morning before he left for his office, something about me staying home with the kids while he went to his fancy marketing job downtown. He'd made a joke about me being a swamp scarecrow if I kept gardening like that. I'd laughed it off at the time. Now he was laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. That was the moment I didn't know was the beginning of everything falling apart. But let me back up, because this wasn't always how things were between us. Michael and I met at a bar in Columbus, Ohio, 12 years ago. I was 23, fresh out of Ohio State, with a business degree I thought I'd use in marketing. He was 25, already working at some startup that felt important and cool. He had this confidence about him, not arrogant, just sure of himself. He knew what he wanted, and apparently that included me. We dated for 3 years, got engaged at Cedar Point on the Millennium Force roller coaster at sunset, and married in a small ceremony at my parents' church in Dublin. For the first 5 years, everything was the kind of perfect that made other people jealous. Michael got promoted twice. We bought a house in Worthington, a nice 4-bedroom colonial with a 2-car garage and actual mature trees in the yard. I worked in marketing too, for a pharmaceutical company. We made good money together, combined income around $180,000 a year. We took vacations to Cancun and Cabo. We had our friends over for dinner parties where I made homemade pasta and Michael grilled steaks. We had the kind of life where people ask us for advice on relationships. Then Emma was born. She came early, at 36 weeks, and she was perfect. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and Michael's nose. I took maternity leave. 6 months turned into a year. Michael was getting busier at work, longer hours, more travel, a conference in Chicago, a client dinner in Cincinnati. When I went back to work part-time, it felt right. I was there for Emma. Michael was building his career. We had a nanny, Maria, who came 4 days a week. Then Lucas came along 3 years later, and I decided to stop working altogether. It made sense. Childcare for 2 kids would have eaten most of my salary. Michael's income was more than enough. He'd started managing a team of 12 people and made about $140,000 a year. I had my degree, my experience, my own professional identity, but I shelved it. I told myself it was temporary, just until Lucas was in kindergarten, just until the kids were older. That was 4 years ago. Now I was 39 years old, staying home with Emma, who was 9, and Lucas, who was 6. Michael was making $165,000 at work. We had money in a 401k. We had a healthy savings account. We had a credit score of 788. We had a house that we were slowly renovating. New kitchen, fresh paint, hardwood floors being refinished. We had a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. Except I'd stopped being someone. I'd become a function. I wasn't conscious of it happening. It wasn't like one day Michael said, "You're going to be my housewife now," and I accepted it. It was gradual. A comment here about how nice it was that I could handle the school pickup because his meetings always ran late. A suggestion there that maybe I shouldn't bother with my old colleagues' emails because I wasn't in the field anymore. When I mentioned going back to work, even part-time, he'd say things like, "But who'd take care of the kids? You know Maria quit." Or, "The house really needs someone here full-time right now." I believed him. I believed that I was needed, that this was my choice. And it was, in a way. But it was also the kind of choice you make when you don't realize there's another option. Michael never said he didn't respect me. He still introduced me to his colleagues as his wife, usually with a hand on the small of my back. He still wanted sex, usually on weekends, and he was still gentle about it. He still asked me how my day was, but the way he listened had changed. His eyes would drift to his phone. He'd hum responses instead of actually engaging. I filled my days with the kids, the house, the garden. Emma had gymnastics. Lucas had soccer. There was always something to organize, cook, fix, clean. I joined the HOA committee. I volunteered at the school. I hosted book club, even though I barely had time to read the books anymore. I was busy. I was productive. I had purpose. Except I didn't. Not really. I started the garden project because I needed something that was just mine. A space where I could make decisions, see immediate results, feel like I'd created something tangible. I'd always loved plants. In college, I'd had 3 terrariums and a wall of succulents. I'd let that go, like I'd let everything else go. The garden was going to be my comeback. Tomatoes, basil, lavender, roses. I was out there 4 mornings a week before the kids woke up, getting my hands dirty, turning the soil, planting seeds. It was the first thing I'd done purely for myself in 4 years. And Michael had mocked it. Not in a mean way. That would have been easier to process. He'd laughed about it, the way you laugh at something small and harmless. A swamp scarecrow. Me, standing in my own garden, trying to build something, and he was making it a joke. When I came home from the grocery store that afternoon, covered in mud, and he was pointing and laughing on the couch, something shifted inside me. It was small, just a crack, but it was there. I didn't say anything. I just put the groceries away and went upstairs to shower. When I came back down, Michael was on his laptop, already moved on, already back to whatever was important to him. Emma was at gymnastics. Lucas was in the living room watching cartoons. I sat down next to Michael and asked, "Do you respect me?" He looked up, confused. "What? Of course I do. Why would you ask that?" "Because you laughed at me when I came home." He closed his laptop. "Babe, I was just joking around. You did look pretty funny covered in all that mud. It's not a big deal." But it was, and I was starting to realize that there were a lot of things I'd let become acceptable that shouldn't have been acceptable at all. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the back porch in the dark and looked at my garden. The tomatoes were starting to come in. The lavender was blooming. I'd built this. I'd made it beautiful. And my husband had laughed at me for it. I didn't know then that this moment, this small, seemingly insignificant moment, was the first domino. I didn't know that there was something else happening, something that would make me realize that the laugh wasn't about the mud at all. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't seen yet, but I was starting to look. The next morning, I woke up alone. Michael had left early for a client meeting in Cleveland, something about a new product launch. I didn't even hear him get out of bed. I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Sorry about yesterday. Didn't mean to be a jerk. Love you, M." I stood there in my bathrobe holding that note, and something inside me refused to accept it as an apology. Because he wasn't sorry. He was just moving on, the way he always did. Say something thoughtless, leave a note, problem solved. Except it wasn't solved. It was just buried deeper. The kids needed breakfast. Emma had a field trip permission slip I'd forgotten to sign. Lucas had lost one of his soccer cleats again. I moved through the morning like I always did, making lunches, packing backpacks, finding lost shoes. But I was somewhere else in my head. I kept replaying that laugh, the way his eyes had looked when he pointed at me, like I was something to be amused by, not someone to be respected. After I dropped both kids at school, I did something I hadn't done in 4 years. I sat down at my laptop and opened my old email account, the one connected to my pharmaceutical marketing career. I hadn't checked it in so long that the password didn't work on the first try. When I finally got in, there were old messages from colleagues, invitations to LinkedIn that I'd ignored, a professional development course I'd signed up for years ago and never completed. I opened a new tab and searched Marketing Jobs Columbus, Ohio. There were pages of them. Marketing coordinator, marketing manager, senior marketing specialist, salaries ranging from $45,000 to $85,000, depending on experience. I clicked on one, a marketing coordinator position at a healthcare software company in New Albany, just 20 minutes from our house. The job description made my pulse quicken. Seeking experienced marketing professional with pharmaceutical industry background, competitive salary, flexible remote options, comprehensive benefits. Experienced. That was the word that stuck in my throat. I had experience. I had a degree. I had 12 years of corporate background before I'd stepped out. But that was a lifetime ago in job market years. 4 years of staying home was a gap that employers would notice. A hole. I closed the laptop. I couldn't do this. Michael needed his income. The house needed me here. The kids needed... No. Stop. That voice wasn't mine. That was the voice I'd let become mine. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Ashley Brennan?" A woman's voice, professional, slightly hesitant. "Yes. Who is this?" "Hi, Ashley. My name is Detective Sarah Chen with the Columbus Police Department. I'm calling about a report we received. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My stomach dropped. "What? What happened? Are my kids okay?" "Your children are fine, as far as I know. This isn't about them. It's about your husband, Michael Brennan. We received a complaint from someone at his workplace, and I need to ask you some questions. Would you prefer to talk now, or would you like to come into the station?" I sat down on the kitchen counter. My legs felt like they weren't going to hold me up much longer. "What kind of complaint?" There was a pause. "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Are you available this afternoon?" I told her yes. I hung up the phone. I sat in my kitchen, the kitchen Michael and I had renovated together, the one with the white subway tile backsplash and the marble countertops, and I realized that whatever had been starting to crack last night had just shattered completely. I didn't call Michael. I didn't text him. I sat there for 20 minutes trying to figure out what the police would want to talk to me about, and I couldn't come up with anything. Michael was boring. Michael was predictable. Michael was a marketing manager who went to meetings and came home and sat on his laptop and laughed at his wife when she had dirt on her face. Michael couldn't have done anything bad enough for the police to call me. Except maybe he had. And maybe I'd been too busy being a swamp scarecrow to notice. The police station was on Parsons Avenue, a 15-minute drive from my house. I sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes before I went inside, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself that this was all some kind of mistake, a case of mistaken identity. Michael with a different last name who'd done something wrong. Detective Chen was waiting for me in a small conference room. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and tired eyes that suggested she'd seen worse than whatever this was. "Thank you for coming in," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. "I know this must be confusing." "It is," I said. "I don't understand why you're calling me about my husband." She opened a folder. "We received a complaint from an employee at your husband's company, Market Pulse Solutions. The complaint involves inappropriate conduct toward a junior employee, sexual harassment, to be specific." I stared at her. The words weren't making sense in the order she was saying them. Sexual, harassment, Michael. "That's not possible," I said automatically. "Michael would never—" "Ashley, I understand this is a shock, but we've already spoken to 3 other women who work in his department. They've all reported similar behavior over the past 2 years. Unwanted touching, comments about their appearance, pressuring them for drinks after work. One of them filed a formal complaint with HR last week. That's what triggered our involvement." 3 women, 2 years. 2 years. That was around the time I'd stopped asking Michael about his day, because his answers had become one-word responses delivered while he scrolled on his phone. 2 years ago, I'd been deep in the garden project, pouring all of my attention into something I could control. 2 years ago, my husband had started harassing women at work. "I need to call him," I said, standing up. "This is a mistake. He wouldn't do this." "You can certainly call him," Detective Chen said calmly, "but I wanted to talk to you first because, legally, I needed to. You're his spouse. There may be other aspects of this you should know about. Has Michael ever exhibited inappropriate behavior toward you? Anything that made you uncomfortable?" I sat back down. I thought about the way he touched me sometimes without asking, when I was doing something else. The way he made comments about my body that I'd learned to laugh off. The way his hands would find me in the dark. And I'd stop saying no because saying no always meant a conversation about how I was being weird about sex. "I don't know," I whispered. "Take your time." I told her about the laughing, not about the garden, that seemed too small, but about how he'd been distant, dismissive, how he'd made me feel small in ways that were hard to articulate. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she slid a business card across the table. "This is the number for the HR department at his company. They're going to be calling you soon, likely, and I'd recommend you speak with an attorney about this, just to protect yourself legally in case there are any corporate liability issues that come up." An attorney. The word hit me like a physical blow. "Do you think he'll be arrested?" I asked. "That's up to the prosecutor, but multiple complaints, corroborating testimony, and a formal HR complaint gives us a strong case. Your husband needs to speak with an attorney immediately." I drove home in a daze. I didn't call Michael. I didn't know what to say. I sat at the kitchen island, the one we'd picked out together during our renovation, and I opened my laptop again. I searched "Divorce Attorney Columbus, Ohio." I wasn't ready to use that search. I knew I wasn't. But I needed to know they existed. I needed to know that if everything fell apart, there was a mechanism for that, a professional process, a way out. That's when my phone buzzed, a text from Michael. "HR called me. This is insane. We need to talk when I get home." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type back, "Okay," but I wasn't okay. And I was starting to understand that I hadn't been okay for a very long time. I'd just been good at pretending. The kids came home at 3 o'clock. I made them snacks and helped with homework and pretended that the world wasn't tilting on its axis. Emma asked me why I looked sad. I told her I was just tired. Lucas wanted to know if we could go to the park. I said maybe tomorrow. Michael came home at 6. He walked in like it was any other day, loosening his tie, setting his briefcase down in the hall. When he saw me sitting at the kitchen table, he stopped. "Don't," he said immediately. "Don't even start. This is all a misunderstanding. These women are just jealous because I got promoted. One of them applied for my job and didn't get it. She's trying to ruin me." "The police said 3 women," I said quietly. "The police? Ashley, the police don't just show up because of office drama. HR handles these things. But yes, 3, which is exactly how I know this is a setup. They're friends. They're coordinating this. Michael, the police took it seriously enough to call me and ask me questions." He ran his hand through his hair, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Then it was gone, replaced with anger. "You talked to the police about me, without calling me first?" "They called me. I didn't have a choice." "You had a choice to call your husband and tell him before you went running to talk to detectives. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand that you just made this worse?" I stood up. "I didn't make anything worse. You did. Whatever you did at that company, you did." "I didn't do anything," he shouted. "I was just friendly. I complimented people. That's not a crime, Ashley. That's just being human." Unwanted touching is a crime, Michael. Sexual harassment is, "I never touched anyone. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't even work anymore. You don't understand the corporate world. You stay home all day in the dirt, and you think you understand office politics? You don't know anything." There it was. There was the real Michael, the one who'd been laughing at me on that couch, the one who'd been slowly, methodically making me believe that I was less than for 4 years. "I need to speak with an attorney," I said. His face went white. "What? No, Ashley, no. We don't need attorneys. We need to stick together. I need you to tell the police that you know me, that I would never do these things. I need you as a character witness." "I'm not going to lie for you." "You're not lying. You're just telling the truth about who I am. You know me. You know I'm not the kind of person who would—" "I don't know you," I said, and it was true. I realized in that moment that I didn't. I'd stopped knowing him years ago, the same way I'd stopped knowing myself. "I don't know you at all." He stepped toward me and I stepped back. That's when the kids appeared in the kitchen doorway. Emma, 9 years old, with her face pale and her eyes wide. Lucas, 6, holding his soccer ball like it was a shield. "Mommy?" Lucas said. "Why are you yelling?" Michael immediately switched into a different voice, calm, gentle, the voice of a man who was handling a difficult situation with grace. "It's okay, buddy. Mommy and Daddy are just having a grown-up conversation. Why don't you guys go upstairs and start getting ready for bed? I'll come tuck you in." The kids left. I stood there in my kitchen, watching my husband pretend to be a good father, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. He was good at this. He was good at making himself look like the reasonable one. He was good at making me look like the unreasonable one. And if I wasn't careful, if I didn't do something right now, he would convince everyone, including my children, that this was all my fault. I walked past him and grabbed my purse. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "Out," I said. I got in my car and I drove to the address I'd found online, the office of Jennifer Marks, Esquire, family law, divorce. It was closed. It was past 6 o'clock, but I sat in the parking lot and I made an appointment for the next morning at 9. And then I sat in my car in the dark and I cried. Not for Michael. Not anymore. I cried for the woman I'd been before I became his wife, the woman with the business degree and the career and the ambitions, the woman who'd known herself. I had to find her again, because if I didn't, I was going to lose everything. And I was starting to understand that I'd already lost far too much. Jennifer Marks' office was in a converted Victorian on the south side of Columbus, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. She was a woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses on a chain and the kind of calm competence that came from handling 1,000 divorces. When I sat down across from her desk that morning, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the coffee she'd offered me, she didn't look surprised. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. I told her about the police call, about the 3 women, about Michael coming home and denying it all. I told her about the garden and the laugh and how I'd stopped being a person somewhere along the way. I told her about the marriage counseling we'd never gone to, the conversations he'd never really had with me, the way he'd slowly dismantled my career while building his own. Jennifer took notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Here's what we're looking at," she said. "Depending on how this criminal case progresses, your husband is facing potential charges. That's going to affect everything: custody, finances, the timeline. What I need to know is, do you want to reconcile? Or are you ready to end this marriage?" I didn't even hesitate. "End it." "Good. Then here's what happens next. We file for divorce immediately. We request temporary custody of the children, which we'll almost certainly get given the circumstances. We freeze the marital assets, the house, the savings, the 401k. Your husband is going to need money for his legal defense, and he's going to get angry about all of this. I want to protect you before that happens." "What about the kids?" I asked. "What do I tell them?" "The truth, age appropriately. They need to know that their father made some poor choices, that it's not their fault, and that you're going to take care of them. Kids are resilient. What they're not resilient to is being lied to." By that afternoon, Jennifer had filed the paperwork. By that evening, I'd served Michael with divorce papers. He came home from work. His office had already placed him on administrative leave, pending the investigation, and found the documents on the kitchen counter. I was upstairs when he read them. I heard the sound of papers being thrown, his voice shouting my name. I didn't go down. Instead, I locked the bedroom door, called Jennifer, and told her to start the process of getting a protective order if he escalated. He didn't. He went quiet instead, which was somehow worse. I could hear him downstairs on the phone, talking to someone, his mother maybe, or his own attorney. His voice was controlled, reasonable. He was already building his narrative, already figuring out how to make himself the victim. The next morning, I took the kids to school and didn't come home. Jennifer had recommended I stay somewhere safe, somewhere Michael couldn't find me. I booked a hotel for 3 nights, the Hilton on Easton Avenue, and I sat in that anonymous room with my laptop, and I started making calls. The first was to my old company, the pharmaceutical firm where I'd worked before Emma was born. I spoke to the director of marketing, a woman named Linda Patterson, who I'd trained before I left. She remembered me. She asked how I'd been. "Not great," I told her honestly, "but I'm looking to come back to work. I know it's been 4 years. I know there's a gap, but I was wondering if there were any positions available, any at all." Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Ashley, we have a marketing specialist position that just opened up. It's not the level you were at before, but it's full-time, benefits included, and it pays $70,000 a year. When can you start?" "Monday?" I asked. "Monday," she confirmed. I hung up the phone and I cried. Not sad tears, release. On Friday, the prosecutor's office announced that they were filing charges against Michael. 3 counts of sexual harassment, 1 count of assault. One of the women had documented unwanted touching. The charges made the local news. Market Pulse Solutions issued a statement saying they had a zero-tolerance policy and that Michael Brennan was no longer an employee. His life was imploding in real time, and I realized that I didn't feel as satisfied as I thought I would. I just felt tired. The kids came to the hotel on Saturday. I'd arranged for Michael to have supervised visitation, which meant he got them for 4 hours while a family services representative watched. Emma knew something was very wrong. Lucas just wanted to know when Daddy would come home. I told them the truth, that Daddy had made some people feel unsafe at his work, that he and I weren't going to be married anymore, that it wasn't their fault and I loved them, and we were going to be okay. Emma cried. Lucas asked if he could still have his soccer cleats. Both questions broke my heart in different ways. Monday morning, I walked into my old office building for the first time in 4 years. Linda had kept my old cubicle open. She'd known somehow that I might come back. My computer was new, but my desk calendar was still there, showing dates from 4 years ago. My photo of the kids, taken when Emma was 5 and Lucas was 2. A picture of Michael and me from our honeymoon in Cancun, both of us sunburned and laughing. I put that photo in a drawer. The first week back was disorienting. I'd forgotten how much I loved this work. The strategy meetings, the product launches, the creative problem solving. I'd forgotten the person I was when I was doing it. Not someone's wife, not someone's mother, just Ashley, a woman with a brain and skills and opinions that mattered. By the 3rd week, my divorce was finalized. Michael's attorney had advised him not to contest it. The sexual harassment charges were going to destroy him in court anyway. He agreed to a settlement that gave me primary custody of the children, the house, and 30% of his 401k. He got visitation on weekends, supervised until the criminal case resolved. The house was mine. The garden was mine. My salary was mine. On the day the divorce was final, I got a call from Detective Chen. The prosecutor had offered Michael a plea deal. If he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of harassment and 1 count of assault, he'd serve 6 months in county jail, followed by probation and mandatory counseling. If he went to trial and lost, he'd face up to 2 years. He took the deal. The night before he reported to jail, Michael asked if he could come to the house to say goodbye to the kids. I said no. I said he could video call them. He didn't even argue. I think he knew by then that he'd lost me completely, and that losing the kids was coming next. Emma asked me why Daddy was going away. I told her he'd made some bad choices and now he had to face the consequences. I told her it was important for people to understand that actions have consequences and that we don't hurt people and get to just walk away from it. "Is Daddy a bad person?" she asked. I thought about that carefully. No, but he did a bad thing, and sometimes good people do bad things, and when they do, they have to take responsibility for it. She seemed to accept that, in the way kids do when they're trying to understand a world that doesn't make sense. 2 months later, I was promoted to senior marketing specialist. 3 months later, I hired an assistant, a young woman named Sarah, who reminded me of myself at 23, hungry and ambitious and terrified of screwing up. I told her on her first day that if she ever felt like she had to choose between her career and her marriage, to run, to get out, to never let anyone convince her that ambition was unfeminine or that sacrifice was love. She looked confused. I didn't explain. The garden grew wild that summer. I didn't have time to tend it the way I had before, but that was okay. It didn't need me to validate it anymore. It existed because I'd made it exist, not because I was constantly fighting to prove its worth. One Sunday, when Michael came to pick up the kids for his visitation, he looked smaller somehow, diminished. He'd lost weight in jail. His hair was starting to gray at the temples. He looked like a man who'd finally understood that his own story wasn't the only story that mattered. "I'm sorry," he said, when Emma and Lucas went to put their shoes on. "For all of it. For laughing at you. For making you feel small. For everything." I looked at him, and I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt nothing, which was worse than anger, I think. Anger means you still care. Nothing means you've moved on completely. "I hope you figure out why you did it," I told him. "I hope you actually change, for the kids' sake if nothing else." "I am," he said. "The counseling is helping. I'm starting to see some things about myself that I didn't want to see before." I didn't respond. I just waited for him to take the kids and leave. That night, after they were gone, I sat in my garden. My garden, not his, just mine. And I looked at the tomatoes coming in, and the lavender that had bloomed twice now, and the roses that had finally started to establish themselves. I'd made this. Not for validation, not for anyone else, just because I wanted to see something beautiful grow. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, the young woman I'd hired. A photo of her in business casual, standing in front of a whiteboard with market analysis on it. The message said, "First campaign meeting tomorrow. Terrified but ready. Thank you for hiring me. You were right. I'm not giving this up for anyone." I smiled. I texted back, "You're going to be incredible." And I meant it. Because I was starting to understand that the most important thing I'd ever done wasn't managing Michael's career, or raising our kids, or creating the perfect home. It was finding my way back to myself. The swamp Scarecrow had become a woman again, and this time, I was never going to let anyone laugh at me for it.